All right, well, we'll make a start. So welcome back. We're up to item 8.4, and it's the proposing to adopt the consultation documents related to the long-term plan 2021-31. But before we actually start the content and looking at the documents, we have to have a conversation and some signing of some documents with Audit New Zealand, and I'd like to welcome Debbie Bradford to the table. And Debbie, you have someone else with you, and unfortunately you'll have to introduce them. So if you would do that, please, that'd be great.
Thank you for welcoming me. To my left, I've got Esther Long. She's from the audit team around the steady audit. I do apologise today that Julian Tan could not be here. Fortunately, he had another engagement in Dunedin he could not be excused from.
Well, thank you. We have to deal with these documents to start with. So the recommendation that we're moving is on page 78 of your agenda, if you're on the right page. And are we having a 1A in there? The Catherine spoke about earlier. We are. So we have a 1A up on the screen. So a 1A, which is a new recommendation, is just being handed out now. This is a requirement of the auditors. This is an addition. Is it on screen?
It was on screen.
Oh, okay. It could be on screen for a minute. This is not a set of words asking for any wordsmithing. It's words that are determined that we have to put in the document to satisfy the audit. So we're just putting it up here as part of the process because this has happened fairly late in the piece. So the vote that I'll be putting, thank you, includes number 1A, notes the auditors have requested that an additional statement be included in the consultation document, deciding what the future of Canterbury looks like. That's that document here. This one. And the second part of that now is going to be 1B, as you can read, agrees to include the statement in the consultation document prior to considering the consultation document for adoption. The wording is to be included on page 21 of that document as part of the climate change and community resilience portfolio information, and reads as follows. Climate change is already affecting Canterbury, and future impacts are likely to include higher temperatures, less rainfall, more frequent and more extreme droughts, strong winds, low humidity, increased risk of soil erosion, sea level rise and coastal erosion, including flooding in some areas, potential for faster speed of pests and weeds. These have the potential to increase our community risk of impact in flood and bush fire prone areas and coastal communities, and will impact how we use our water resources. So first of all, I think we'll just move that resolution, or we move one with it. One, and that one is going to be moved with one. So 1 reads, approves the signing of the audit representation letter and delegates the chair's authority to sign. So that's what we're moving to start with. So I'm going to move that from the chair. Yes.
Can we? I'd like to know why the auditors have requested this addition be put into our discussion document.
Catherine, can I? Well, CEO, can I have some
Debbie, did you want to speak to that, please? Yes, this clause has been included for profile within the consultation document. We have it mentioned in various places in the supplementary information. It was just to raise profile through this consultation document.
Thank you, Catherine. So that obviously satisfied the auditor that we've got that in there. So what we'll be moving here is the 1A, the 1B and the 1, which is approving me signing the letter. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. Is there any questions for clarification now, or is everybody happy? Okay, I'll put that resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. And obviously there's nobody against, so that is carried. So now what happens is I sign the letter. On the advice of the staff, so that's great. So I won't hold the meeting up to, was that the only place to have to sign? Yes. Right, thank you very much. And you're going to go and hand it to Debbie for me. So thank you, Debbie, for being here to receive that. Sorry. What happened to, I didn't know too. Yeah. So thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. So you're going to present it to us now. The audit report. Thank you. Thank you, Catherine. All right, now I want to thank Audit New Zealand for all their work on it, and you know, it's a requirement we've had to meet, but we really appreciate you two being involved and for coming along here today. Thank you very, very much. Now, do you want to say anything?
I just want to thank the LTP team. It was really good working with everyone. I think we worked quite well. I know that we pushed things out together till quite towards the end, but I think we all landed on a happy place and we're all comfortable with where we landed. So I just want to express my thanks to the team that helped us get to where we needed to get to today.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Debbie, and thanks for working under such tight arrangements. I guess you're pretty practiced at it, but thank you anyway. So that's great. And to all the staff as well. All right, so now we're going to keep going and I'm going to move on page 78, recommendation number 2, which is receives the independent auditor's report from the Auditor General on deciding what the future of Canterbury looks like, Environment Canterbury's 10-year plan, prepared in accordance with section 93C, small brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 2002. And I believe I'm moving recommendation 3 along with this. Resolves on the basis of the independent auditor's report that the consultation document will achieve the purpose of providing an effective basis for public participation in local authority decision-making processes relating to the content of the draft long-term plan in accordance with section 93B, 93D of the Local Government Act of 2002. I'll ask Peter Scott, would he like to second that? Seconded by Peter Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? No, that's carried. Thank you very much. Now, I don't know if you want to keep sitting at the table during all this period, but you're welcome to if you want to, or you could feel more relaxed in the back pew maybe. Now we're up to recommendation number 4 and number 5, number 6 and number 7. I'm going to move those in a block. And then we're going to have the substantive discussion or debate or whatever it might be. And then what will happen is I will take them for moving separately. So I won't move them as a block. I'll move them separately. So number 4, just so that they get on for the people listening to any recording, adopts the draft long-term plan 2021-31 supplementary information, which is relied on by the content of the consultation document in accordance with section 93G of the Local Government Act 2002. adopts for public consultation the draft revenue and financing policy and the associated summary of this policy as provided in the consultation document. Number 6, adopts the consultation document deciding what the future of Canterbury looks like for public consultation in accordance with section 93A of the Local Government Act 2002. And number 7, delegates to the Chief Executive the authority and responsibility for agreeing minor editorial changes to the consultation document and the supplementary information. So now I'd invite, well, I won't need a second. Well, where's she gone? I don't need a seconder now. I can just, I can have a seconder now. Okay. No, won't I wait till that's right. Yes, that's what I was thinking. So thank you very much, Louise. So I would like to open up for discussion the block of recommendations. We'll have an order. So who would like to go first? All right, Peter. I'll just say something first, actually, before we do that. So actually, I'd like to introduce the actual consultation documents, this one and the other one. I'm speaking to the whole thing. I'd just like to recognise that that's been a result of a lot of hard work from all the staff and everybody around the table and the audit office. It's been a pleasure to work with everybody. I think we've done really well. We've had some ups and downs along the way, but we've done the best we can to try and get out and our duty as elected democratic representatives of the wider community across Canterbury to put something together that we hope grabs the attention of the community and inspires them to either send us an email, go online and fill out our consultation documents, or just writes us a letter or comes to see us or communicates to us in some way. We recognise actually it's probably a fairly big ask for people to read our big thick document, and so that's why we've provided the smaller one. And the public should know that if they've got any questions at any time, they can ring up any of the elected members or the staff through the information officer at Canterbury Regional Council and ask questions. So we're trying to be as accessible as we can be. But I just want to recognise that I think we've provided very well. And if it looks like 24%, if you think that 14% of the rates are actually targeted rates, and if you bother to go and have a look at our big document, you'll see how complicated that is in terms of working out what rates could be actually an average across the rate take. So you're really, and just as the 24% is very difficult to understand. So what I'd recommend for everybody is that they go online to our rates calculator and put their own address in, your own property, and find out what's happening to your property. Because once you have a look, it may not look like 24%. So it's a very complicated thing, the rates are. So I'd like to say that I think we've done a great job around pressing issues, particularly the climate change issue. And I'm very glad that the auditors have required us to put this more detailed statement in the consultation document, because I think it makes it clear to everybody what we all really know the reality is about climate change and the position the world's in, and we are here in Canterbury. So one of the things that we've been trying to provide for is some more reserves around flooding in our rivers and to look after people's well-being through that. So I'm very pleased that we've done that. We've also responded to the COVID-19 recovery by allocating and accepting the government's challenge to take up the money, and through that we've had to put some of our own money and funds towards that. So that's contributed to the money that we're consulting on as well. And I'm really proud of the fact that we could have stepped up the wild and conifer, and particularly the wild and conifer, because EDS has given a recent report where they said about 50 million needed to be spent on that urgently, or we had no hope of getting it under control. So it's one of the gifts from COVID-19 that we have actually achieved that, and we've given a lot of people jobs. So it's really fantastic. I think it's great that we're looking at the central freshwater the way we are, and we are being driven to some extent by the government's new requirements, but it's all a journey into the future where we have to do something to clean up our waters across the whole region. I'm very excited about the tree planting and biodiversity work that we've been doing, and particularly some of the projects we're doing in that area, and pest control, which is urgent in terms of our biodiversity stress that our region's under. But more important, I think it's really fantastic that we're doing community education and that we're providing some more funds towards our enviro schools and working with nature, our nature-based education, because everybody needs to know about nature going into future. And that's the only way we can deal with biodiversity recovery and ecologically sustainable decision making. I think it's great that we're strengthening our investment in the Tuia partnership, and in fact, I'm so excited to have the Tumu Taiao at our table and the work we're going to continue to do around that going into the future. So I'd just like to finish there by saying I hope you all enjoy reading this document. I think staff have done a great job on it, and the pictures are fantastic, and all the word and wordsmithing led by Taflin has been fantastic. So thank you very much for all your work, and to the money people, thank you too, and all the other thinkers in strategy and planning and everybody else. So I'll open it up for discussion now, and we'll just take everybody in order. So we're going to start with you, Peter.
Kia ora, Jenny, and thank you for this. This is our first major piece of work that we've done as a council, and I'd just like to endorse what you've said, Jenny, around staff, especially Taflin, in terms like Tier 2s have done a fantastic job on this, and a lot of hand wringing, a lot of effort put in, Taflin, and well done to you to get us to where we are today. I can't stress enough that this is a consultation document. It's what we've come to in terms, after we've done our strategic planning, it's what we've come to in terms of the view that we have of Canterbury. And there's a lot of things that have happened in that time. COVID's came along, and it's upset things. And Jenny, I think you've canvassed the regional stuff pretty well, but I'd just like to look at it from my ratepayers' point of view. And my ratepayers, I guess, in my constituency and also Elizabeth's constituency will be surprised by the headline numbers that we've got in terms of percentages. And I consider a majority of them might be a little angry and a little annoyed in terms of where we stand. But again, I'll say this is consultation. There's a lot of water got to go under the bridge before we actually sit down and make the decision in terms of what the final numbers will be. But my request, I guess, to my ratepayers, and we will make ourselves available, Elizabeth and I will make ourselves available at every opportunity to talk to them directly. And if you have a criticism of ECAN, if you have a criticism of me personally in terms of what I am doing in South Canterbury, I want to invite you to have a face-to-face conversation. I don't want to have a conversation through Facebook, Instagram, or any other means, but I'd like to have a face-to-face conversation. And I'd encourage people to do that, to engage with us on this. I haven't made my decision in terms of where I see my final stance on this. I think that we will wait until the submission process is done, and we will then analyse where we stand on that, because that's the final decision we make in terms of what we're asking people to do to support us with their money going forward. And I'm not going to make any excuses for the things that we have to do here. We have to work in a very tight environment. 96%, I think, of the rating and tax money in New Zealand is spent by central government. There is not much left over for us to do the things that we need to do. And there's more and more stress put on our systems to actually deliver essential fresh waters. That step change that we're expected to make as communities in terms of fresh water delivery, our climate change response, and how we're going to go about that and inform people. Our responsibility for coming up with a replacement coastal plan, our responsibility for doing another regional policy statement. And I know many people won't understand that we have those responsibilities, I was talking to people the other day and they didn't realise that the harbour master works for Environment Canterbury. There are a lot of things that we do that people don't understand. That's why I want the opportunity to stand in front of people and talk to them about what we do. I haven't got all the answers, but I'm prepared to listen. And I would encourage anyone, and I was going to say write it down on the back of the cigarette packet, but you don't do that anymore because there's no cigarette packets, but just write a note to us about what you feel. We will take the opportunity to invite you to stand in front of this council and tell us what you think in terms of where we're headed with this. So I won't take any more time, Madam Chair, but I would, if I could do anything, I'd encourage people to sit down and make a submission, to contact people and talk about this document, which we will get to decide on, I think, in June. Is it June? At the end of June. So there's a lot of time between now and then before we get to where we need to get to. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Who would like to go next? Councillor Lam.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I really want to echo Councillor Scott's thanks to staff. Obviously, there was a mammoth effort put into this. This is a big ask of our communities. It's a big proposal, and it took a lot of hard work behind the scenes and to get us to today. So thank you for that. I support where we've got to with the LTP. I do, again, acknowledge it is a big ask to our communities. And I hope that in the message that this is a big ask, they can see that it's not just this financial ask that we're asking in terms of our long-term plan, but it's actually an appeal to ask of them to be part of actions to address this climate and ecological emergency that we are in, because that is our unfortunate reality. And this is just one small part, I think, of an attempt to address that. We can't delay addressing it. And as regional governors, it demands a regional response. And it's something that is both necessary and urgent. So I really look forward to hearing the community's views on what we've proposed. And I did just want to flag, Chair, one minor edit change, which I think is pretty critical for clarity for the community. Excuse me. And that is on page 27 of the consultation document under borrowing for operating expenditure. And it's been flagged previously, but I think it just needs specific mention here. It refers to the, oh, sorry. Let me go to it. No, that's all right. It's the paragraph above the table on page 27. It talks about the natural capital projects, specifically those within the freshwater planning program of work. Now, my understanding is that that refers to, it says freshwater planning, but it actually refers to our freshwater plans, our coastal environment plan, and our regional policy statement. And I think that needs to be made clearer and spelled out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Farn. I couldn't agree more. I think that absolutely needs to be spelled out. So we'll ask the CEO to take that on board as a minor change. I read that myself, and I'm very appreciative that you brought that up. Thank you. That's excellent. So would you like to say any more? Oh, cool. Okay, who would like to go next? Oh, Yaya, you're next.
Tēnā tātou katoa, nei anō te mihi kia koutou katoa. He mihi hoki ki ka kai kaunihera mo te kaunihera Taiao ki Waitaha mo koutou maia, mo tēnei tau kua hipa, mo tēnei rautaki te pai tāpiti. He rawe o koutou mahi, no reira tēnā koutou, tēnā. I'd just like to acknowledge the councillors sitting around this table. Firstly, for your support in making sure the Tumu Taiao and the Waitahu voice was here at council. We don't get to vote, but we be part of the process on the standing committees and also in the portfolios and committees that will be coming forward in the next year. But just acknowledge you all and endow Vet and I to sit here to represent Waitahu from Kaikoura all the way down to the Waiho and the Waitaki. So, no reira, tēnā koutou. I'd also like to acknowledge the bravery of the current council and councillors for your work on the strategic direction, the transformational opportunities and the enduring priorities. leading to an aspirational long-term plan for all of Canterbury, from the mountains to the sea. Also for your continued support to advance the Environment Canterbury two-year relationship and partnership with Papatipu Runanga and Ngaitahu. You've carried on the work from the last council, so actually having the former councillor Cynthia Roberts in attendance today was appropriate, because there's the proposed work on biodiversity and climate change is taking it to a level where it should be. So acknowledge the work on that and to the staff. The work on improving our fresh water continues, with the emphasis on the new essential freshwater package, in particular Te Mano Te Wai, and bringing Mahika Kai and the establishment of a framework and strategy that integrates Mātauranga Māori into this organisation, which is, bring it into the science and right through the organisation is a great step forward. There's been some negative press and comments already about this LTP from councillors from a different council, and I hope the ratepayers of Canterbury don't listen to that rhetoric and don't focus on the percentage rate rise, but actually read the consultation document and look at the proposed work programs and make an informed decision where they want their rates spent. We need to make change, and we need an enduring environment for the generations to come. Mō tātou a mō kaumuri a muri aki nei. Nō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou. Kia ora.
Thank you, Tumu Taiao. Jane Kreml. Who would like to be the next person? Councillor Grant Edge. You're next.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to reflect on the journey that we've taken to deliver and produce this consultation document, because as you say, that's what it is. It's getting a document out there for the community to have a look at and see what they think. But we started the journey in February last year. Then we had lockdown. In terms of our lockdown, to start to develop this strategic direction, we almost locked ourselves in a room for a few days with staff, and we had great discussions. We talked about why we had been elected the previous October by our constituents, and the consensus being, of course, that we had to look after our environment. We had to consider climate change, land use change, put an end to pollution of our waterways and drinking water. People wanted an improvement to biodiversity, and they wanted swimmable rivers, amongst other things as well. So the strategic direction that we ended up with, I think, achieved all of those things, and it included those transformational and enduring priorities that you've talked about. And those things, to my mind, have been incorporated and run through fairly consistently through the supplementary document, and in turn and through the consultation document as well, which I think is really, really good. And we've taken a holistic and integrated approach to all the various parts of things that we've got to look at, and that's going to deliver some really good outcomes, I think. And again, I want to congratulate and thank the staff for working with us. It's been a long journey. Staff throughout the old business as usual programs that they've been working with and started afresh, and that's enabled them to look seriously at various aspects of budgetary items and all sorts of things. But I mean, the purpose of this LTP, if you like, is to deliver some levels of service that are going to support positive change for future generations. And I was thinking of people around this room and who we've got in this room. We've got a new mum, we've got other mums with young children, a mother with primary school children, we've got fathers with teenage kids, we've got parents with young adults, grandparents, pensioners, farmers, businessmen, scientists and contract managers, a really diverse range of people from different backgrounds, reflective, I think, a lot of our community. And of course, we have our two Tumu Taiao mana whenua experts to help guide us around the table as well. So I think we have responded to what our community had wanted us to do, and that we are making progress, but we do need to act faster. Government's telling us to act faster. The recent Climate Change Commission reports also telling us that we need to get a move on, and internationally around the world too. People were just saying, let's get on with this before it's too late. So I think our long-term plan is courageous, as Gayan has said. And that percentage figure sounds enormous, but it doesn't tell the true story. It's, the median, I think on page 13 of the consultation document, it gives an example of a typical rates increase for a median house in Christchurch, which is about $80 increase per annum. And those rates vary across Canterbury as well. So for me, I think that this is going to work really well for Canterbury, and we've developed something that's in the best interests of Canterbury. And I, like others, encourage the community to read it, and if they can, look at that more supplementary information, which is quite complex. Get onto the rate calculation sheet, and certainly ask questions of us, and seek clarification. And I look forward to as many people submitting on this as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Edge. Who's going to go next? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I first, again, as with others, thank staff, recognising the real stresses of bringing this through, the changes, the differing iterations, COVID, right from the top with you, Stephanie, as the Chief Executive, and we talk about the tier ones and tier twos, but it drives right into the organisation as budgets are built and thoughts are thought. So I will support all the motions taking this out for consultation. But I wear today my tax and spend time, my great red one. I unlocked it from the back of the closet and released it for the day. I am uncomfortable with where we have landed with our two options of 24% and 18%. For me, if we had options of 18 and 13 or somewhere around that, I could justify standing up and arguing for it. I just don't believe that we have been as active as we could have in looking at our budgets, given the enormity of what we face. And part of the reason for that is if we look at rate rises that we have presumed to be ongoing, and what we haven't been able to do is lock in the monies required to do the work that central government will visit upon us. Some of it is in there, but from an audit and a process, we have not been able to fully budget and account for what may need to be spent into the future. So when we look at 2, 3, 4%, 5% rises going forward, I have a real concern that our actual level of rate rise for the next 5, 6, 7 years will be considerably more than we have. So I have a nervousness. So I do ask the ratepayers to look very hard at this and understand it. And if you can, come up with some options to reduce some of that expenditure by a few percent at least to achieve what I think is a more sustainable outcome. If I can move then, having lost that debate, I guess, at this table, we move to a conversation around uniform annual general charges, which is an opportunity to smooth some of that rate rise. Staff came up with a proposition of $144. Our charge at present is $25. We've managed to shift that by about $20. For a significant farm in my area, the difference between a $0 and a $144 is $2,000 in rates. So while we talk about the average rate rise within the city, and average is average, so obviously there are a bunch of ratepayers pay less than that in their increase, For those with farms, with significant assets, with business, our 24 or 18% as we sit today sees them paying $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 more in rates, and they are getting the same outcome that any other individual will have. The UAGC is built on opportunities and outcomes for people and individuals. It's not based on the value of property or whatever. So I see an inequity and try to challenge that through our conversations, that why should someone pay $10 and someone pay $2,000 for exactly the same service that comes to them. So again, I would ask the ratepayers, when they look at this document, to understand the uniform annual charge. If we are going to be fair about the rate rise, if that is where it sits, then I would like to see us have some balance and parity across, some fairness, some well-being. We hear a lot about well-being and fairness and justness. I am not sure that an extra couple of $1,000s from someone in a rural community because they have a farm asset is a just way of taxation. My other point in here is borrowing, and some have suggested that we should go out and borrow to reduce the tax burden. For me, it is the same as putting the groceries on the credit card and then wondering how you are going to pay for them in the future. We're talking about borrowing to pay operational expenses, not capital expenses. We should be looking, if we borrow, for those opportunities that are long-term, that are intergenerational, or are capital projects that have a long-term view. We should not be thinking about borrowing just to pay the bills on the way through the year. So while it might seem an appropriate way of doing things because it reduces the bill, we must remember that for the next 10 years, we are paying the principal and the interest on that loan to continue. And as I said before, we will find ourselves in a position where our rates will be significantly more, I suspect, than we think they are. So I ask those communities out there, those ratepayers, to really look and understand and make some decisions about, one, where they might see some changes that we could make to reduce the rates overall. A conversation with us around the uniform annual charge to bring a wee bit of parity, equity and fairness across the whole of Canterbury, not just imposing that impost on a portion of us, and to think about the borrowing. I think I will finish there. As I said, I will vote for it to go for consultation. As Councillor Scott said, this is a consultation document, but I really implore the ratepayers of Canterbury to read it, to understand it, and make some valued contributions back as submissions to try and bring some sense, some sustainability, and some fairness to this long-term plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sunkel. Who would like to go next? Well, I just start asking people. Councillor Nicole Marshall.
Thanks, Chair Jenny. The choices that we make every day have a huge hand in shaping our future. Many of the choices that those before us have made have created huge environmental and social debt that we are now realising, experiencing, and we're going to have to endure. Our communities are telling us that we need to do more to protect and restore the environment, to improve public transport, to help them be prepared for the effects of climate change, and that we need to adapt to increasing government regulation. This is what is offered in this package. Is it everything that we could possibly do, or that I personally think needs to be done? No, it's not. But it's a heck of a lot more than we've done in the past. We've put in dedicated funding for improving the state of our urban rivers. We've increased funding to engage with communities to ensure that community voice is heard and is better reflected in our decision making, to ensure every school on our waitlist can be a part of the EnviroSchools program, creating a generation of conscious champions and embedding learnings and behaviours in homes across the region. We have dedicated funding to ensure we can meet the requirements of the new National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management. In December, a national review of regional council said that we've done an average job of implementing the existing or previous versions of the NPS. That's not a failing of our staff at any means. That's a failing from previous decision makers to make decisions that value the needs of our environment, our communities, and mana whenua as much as they value economic growth. This long-term plan signals our commitment to righting these historic imbalances. Today, we are being asked to endorse this document for public consultation. This gives everyone the opportunity to tell us if we've got it right. Community feedback will shape where we land. And this gives everyone a choice to consider, the choice to continue to complain that ECAN does nothing ever and we do everything wrong, or the chance to support our attempts to do better by our people and our region for today and into the future as well. Now, here in Christchurch, since John's also, Councillor Sunkel's also used his home as an example, our rates are 10 to 15% of our total rates bill we receive each year. A 25% increase in our ECAN's rates would mean our overall bill goes up 3%. By my count, a 25% increase in our ECAN rates in dollars is less than a 5% increase of our City Council rates. And I imagine that this balance of rating is comparable across other TAs, but I have not done the comparison. Like the councillors and Tumu Taiao before me, I want to thank and congratulate all staff that have been involved, external parties who have supported our staff through this process, and the councillors around the table for helping us arrive to where we are today. We started with a blank balance sheet, and now we have a document proposed for consultation that could be said to reflect the mood of much of council. I want us to step up and do more to deliver a healthy environment, as is required by government and is ever requested by our communities. Importantly, we need to know if our communities are ready to commit the funding that would enable us to deliver what they want us to. I'm here, like Councillor Scott said, and I want to work with our communities to help them be involved in this process. The word submission, it sounds really daunting, but it's not. And I want to help anyone who needs assistance work through this process. Honestly, I'm really looking forward to working with councillors around the table, councils and other TAs and our communities to ensure that everyone understands and sees what it is we do, but on the reverse can also hold us to account for the actions that we are signalling in this document, getting something really tangible for our community's money for this rating ask.
Thank you very much, Councillor Marshall. Who would like to go next? Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie.
Add my voice in support of the proposed motions, and just want to support what Jenny, Yayan, Lan, Grant and Nicole have said. We've got an unprecedented budget because we live in unprecedented times. When I made my inaugural speech in 2019, I said that there were things that regional government could do to help us survive climate change and the ecological emergency. Today, we're presenting our plan to do those things. Many of these items have not been budgeted for in the past, and many are to fix long-standing environmental degradation. Restoring our environment doesn't come cheap. However, because regional rates are spread across the entire Canterbury region, your actual rates dollar values are an order of magnitude below the District Council rates that make up the bulk of your rates bill. For example, a typical median house in Temuka will have a regional rates bill of about $300 per annum, which is about $60 more than previously. We know that climate change is affecting our water cycle, and we need to change what we eat and how we farm. Our proposed long-term plan provides funding to help our farmers transition to a more environmentally sustainable way of farming. It provides significant funds to improve water management, coastal marine protection, and it provides more staff for water consent monitoring and compliance. We know that climate change is increasing the risk of severe climatic events. Our proposed long-term plan provides a significant funding package for flood protection and river restoration. It provides more funding for risk assessment, civil defence, community resilience, and climate change adaptation. We know that climate change is affecting our biodiversity and our biosecurity. Our proposed long-term plan provides funding for mixed exotic and native tree planting program and support for landowners who are restoring biodiversity to their land. It provides a new contestable fund for community groups who are restoring biodiversity in their communities, as these groups are in dire need of funding sources. In order to mitigate our effects on the environment, we need to change the way that we travel. Our proposed long-term plan provides funding for cheaper, more environmentally sustainable public transport that will not only reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, but will also improve our air quality. In my original speech in 2019, I said that the decisions our generation makes will determine the world our future generations live in. In order to make good decisions about our future, we're investing to strengthen our democratic processes and engagement with the community. Our option 1 will increase the involvement of young people in our organisation, and it will fund more staff for our oversubscribed EnviroSchools program, so that the next generation will be better stewards of the environment than we were. For me, the long-term plan is good, but does not go far enough, fast enough. We live in a time where our environment is at a tipping point, and we need to do something drastic in order to protect what we have and to restore what we have lost. Too long, we have taken from the environment to the point where we have now imperiled our survival. Now we all need to cooperate together to protect our environment in Canterbury. So I encourage all residents and ratepayers to support our long-term plan and to submit their views and opinions on our plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Who would like to go next? Councillor Claire Mackay. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like all my fellow councillors, I too would like to acknowledge the effort the staff put into developing the 10-year financial strategy over the last few months. And the presentation of the consultation document, in my opinion, is extremely well done, so special mention to Taff and your team. But for me, that's where it actually stops. I'm extremely concerned and alarmed with the proposed rate rises in both options, not only in the current pandemic environment, but in any situation. And over the last year, the impact of COVID on businesses, families and individuals has been significant, with severe disruption, contraction or cessation of businesses and the flow-on effect of job security and availability. And that cloud still hangs over us. The proposed level of rating increase for the preferred option is an average of 24.5, which is completely and utterly unsustainable and far outstrips incomes and inflation. Our ratepayers live in the real world. I live in the real world. The subsequent annual increases, as Councillor Sinknell pointed out, are outlined on page 7 of the consultation document. They are not fixed in stone, far from it. And while they're much smaller in later years, they are subject to review in an annual plan process, and they will go up. When I add up those increases from the preferred option, we're going to see a 56.6% increase over and above what we're paying today, at least in the lifetime of that long-term plan. And this is not head in the stuff, head in the sand stuff, because nobody questions the importance of looking after our environment and making the changes to improve it for ourselves and future generations. And I acknowledge the essential freshwater package will result in significant additional expenditure over and above the many millions, something like 40 odd million that we've already spent here in Canterbury, getting us going in the right direction. And one thing I do support about it is the leveraging of the government funds for flood protection and climate resilience, and alongside the wilding and wallaby pest control. But what I can't support is the huge upfront rise due in part to the transformational change, the nice to haves. In my opinion, much of that change is already occurring and it's being led by other parties, sectors or interest groups, innovators and entrepreneurs. And I ask, how big is the role that we need to play? So much is already happening in the race to keep ahead of government directives. I also remain to be convinced that our current business as usual, that is the core functions and statutory duties that we've been doing, has been maximised for efficiencies and effectiveness despite persistent questioning. The average household just can't budget for 24.5% alongside everyday household increases and constrained incomes. Similarly, as Councillor Sutton raised before, higher capital value assets don't necessarily relate to the ability to pay or the income level of the ratepayer. And this is particularly relevant in the provinces where these assets have high values. And these increases will be in the hundreds to several $1,000s, nowhere near the $110 for the lower option or $136 average that is in the document. We're talking about other people's hard-earned money here. During the discussions, much was made about the impact of the small increase in the UAG from 26 to 43 or those sorts of figures on low-income earners as this plan has been developed. Yet the majority around the table find the extent of the proposed rate increases acceptable. How is it that this council is so out of line with other councils in the region? Of the 9 with a UAG, 3 exceed $570 out to $656 in the latest annual plans. 2 are between $250 and $350, and 3 between $130 and $175 per rateable property. As a governor with the financial responsibilities not only to this organisation, but to the constituents I represent and the wider Canterbury region, I believe we need to seriously consider affordability, be prudent with our finances and cut our cloth to suit, instead of what appears like fiscal incompetence to me. To those of my colleagues who say that we can borrow to make the number smaller, please don't insult the intelligence of our ratepayers. We all know that borrowing to pay for today, and it was raised before, costs a lot more in the long run. Low interest rates won't be around forever, and borrowing to pay for operational expenses or costs is dangerous ground. Where will the balance be in 10 years when we want to borrow again and again? What and how will we meet the future challenges or unexpected asset replacements? Where is the leadership from this council? What we go out with should have been sensible, and 24.5% is not. This is not accountability. Fellow councillors have said it is only a consultation document going out for feedback, and it is. But I'm embarrassed and saddened that we've not looked more closely at what is included, particularly with a lens across, is the plan doable? Is it credible? Can the community afford it? It is indeed my hope that council will now go back to staff and ask how these increases can be significantly reduced. The reality is we know very few ratepayers normally bother to engage or provide feedback. And I implore ratepayers, like others have, to respond to this document loud and clear, for the council will deliberate and set rate increases in several months' time. It was critical to get this right, and I don't think we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackay. Councillor Craig Pauling.
Kia ora tātou. Ai, tuatahi tēnei ngā mihi ki a koutou mō ngā kaikaunihera, ngā Tumu Taiao, ngā kaimahi o tēnei kaunihera. Nei te mihi ki a koutou. So yeah, like others, I just want to start off by acknowledging the journey we've been on and the work that we've all put in. I think it's really important for people to know how hardworking this council is. Not only the staff, but also the elected members that have been put around the table, and recently our Tumu Taiao as well. You know, it's my first term and I didn't quite know what to expect from council. You know, you hear the old stories of the sleepy dude in the corner of the room or whatever. Nah, but it's totally not like that. And I've been so impressed with you know, the amount of attendance and the alertness and the energy of our councillors that come to this table, you know, regularly, twice a week for those full days that we sit here and we discuss the issues that are important for our region. So yeah, I just want to acknowledge everybody. And
in saying that, it does go back a whole year, as Grant said, to us coming together to form our strategic direction, which I'm really proud of, and I think we should all be proud of. We passed it unanimously, so I hope that everyone's proud of it, because that's where it starts for me. It's when we first got a chance to put into action the things that we heard from our ratepayers, from our residents, from our communities, when we stood in the last election. And to me, this LTP, this draft LTP, is our chance to start putting that strategic direction into action. And so that's why I support what we're putting out to the community, because it starts giving a life to that strategic direction. Like others have said, it includes our enduring work, the things that we have to do as well, that we're statutorily required to do, but also the transformational things that we know we have to get on with, and that there's a need for that. And just responding to other councillors' sort of concerns about the need, I know from personal experience that it is volunteer community groups that are picking up the slack of protecting our environment from years of miss or under investment and the lack of protection that we've given to some things. So that's a fact. And I don't think that's totally right. I think it's good, and I think it's great that community groups are out there doing the things that they need to do, but it's not right when we have a mechanism to help support that. So that's, I think there's a definite need there, and I've experienced that in my own life. And like I said, I support this draft LTP because I'm proud of it. I'm proud of what we've all done together, that we've had our debates, and that we've worked with staff to bring together a program of work that we think is a step in the right direction. And of course, it goes without saying that provides a significant amount of work to address those complex and urgent issues that we know we're dealing with, whether that's to do with our whenua, our wai, our biodiversity, our air, or our Taiwan, our coasts, and also dealing with those issues around climate change, air quality, odour, dust, urban development, transport. We all know those are there, they're massive. That's what we hear from our constituents all the time. And of course, it's really needed because it's going to deal with some of the things that are coming at us from our government that are asking us to do better. And of course, our government's put there by our people, our country. And there's no coincidence that that's happening, because people want that. They see that need. And that's related to the reforms around freshwater, biodiversity, and of course, the way we manage our natural resources. And of course, COVID-19 just adds another flavour to that we're all dealing with and we've all dealt with. And also support this draft because it's needed, and it responds to the issues that we heard from our communities and the willingness that I heard from people to want to do more. So that's why I'm in support of where we've got to at the moment. And I acknowledge that is a big ask, like Councillor Farm has said. We're asking for additional rates, and I take that seriously. I know that means real money out of real people's incomes that comes into here, and they trust us to do something with that. And so I don't do that lightly. But as I said, it's based on the needs that I've heard and that I see with my own eyes. And I'd like to make a mention of the UAGC issue, and that we had rigorous debate about that. And I think that where we got to around almost doubling that UAGC is not insignificant in its own right. So I think that's an important thing to talk about. And that in terms of relativity around the country, we don't know this yet, but we've heard that other regional councils around the country are likely to be in a similar position to us. That's no coincidence, because it's the same issues that they're dealing with in terms of the environment, our air, our land, our water, and of course the issues coming down from the reform of the way we do that. So yeah, like I said, I really support where we've got to, and like others, I really commend our communities to respond to us, to get out there, to read the documents, to make their submission to us and tell us what they think about where we've got to. I look forward to that. I look forward to supporting that. And in particular, I really want them to look at some of those transformational things that we're trying to do around Brader River revival, climate change, resilience, managing our coastal environment, coastal planning, clean air, investing for our future, and also our education and engagement with youth and the community and education. And of course, I'd be foolish not to say the Meru Rako program as well, that I think's, something that we can be proud of in terms of something new and innovative to help our communities, like I started off in my corridor today. So thank you for all the work that's been done, and I look forward to hearing from our community in the next few months. Over.
Thank you, Councillor Fawley. Councillor Megan Hand.
Kia ora tātou. I want to start by saying that I come to this debate with a great sense of both frustration and also relief that we're finally having this debate in public. It's been a testing year, as others have talked about, but particularly in the last few months where we've gone through workshopping the long-term plan and having lengthy discussions about our ratepayers' money behind closed doors, and I found that incredibly frustrating and to lack transparency. But here we are today, able to talk openly and freely about where we've got to with this consultation document. I want to start by just talking about the context, some context about where we've got to from here in terms of our organisation and our the workshopping that we have done to get to here, and also local government funding in general, before I get into my frustrations about where we've got to with this consultation document, if everybody will entertain that. I want to acknowledge staff, as others have before me, but I want to acknowledge staff in a different way, in that I want to acknowledge and make the public know that our staff have worked incredibly hard on this with an extremely divided council. And that is a very difficult job. They have not always received clear information from us about where we're going. There's some differently held views across this table. And so our staff should be rewarded and acknowledged for getting us a document to take to the public. Despite whether some of us agree with what's in it or not, we really need to ensure that the public knows how hard they've worked. And any feedback that is given to our organisation on this long-term plan and on this document, I really hope that the feedback is directed and any malice is directed at us as councillors, because we're the ones that run and we're the ones who have to be accountable. And please don't lay into our staff as a result through this process. I'd also like to acknowledge where we are as a council in terms of some of that context around our financial position. We are fortunate that, unlike other regional councils and other councils around the country, we came through COVID pretty well financially. We didn't have other income streams that were largely impacted by COVID, with the exception of bus fares, which NZTA have kindly helped us out with. So we are sitting in a pretty decent position relative to other councils who are finding deficits that they were not expecting before COVID hit. The funding model in local government is broken. The PT model is broken and is outside. Funding model is broken and it is outside of the realms of where it needs to sit if the government's really serious about climate change. And I think most people around the table here, that's something we'll all agree on. Simultaneously, though, we've had that conversation about uniform annual general charges, as a number of the councillors who've spoken before me have mentioned, and I was really frustrated that we had that conversation behind closed doors, because it's fundamental to the fairness around who pays for what. Now, look, there's lots of different ways of assessing what is fair and what is equitable, but the important thing for me is to go through all of the roles and functions that this council does and the things that we need to achieve and understand who benefits. And it was important to me that we had an open and public conversation about whether or not making improvements in water quality or getting better data about the state of our waterways or air or the likes, having those conversations about actually do we all share in those problems, and therefore do we all share in the cost in finding those solutions and paying for those things. Unfortunately, that conversation was held behind closed doors, and we have seen a doubling of the UAGC. But we also haven't utilised that mechanism within local government funding that we could have to ensure that we got the funds in that we needed in a way that was more equitable and that allowed for all ratepayers to contribute to some of our problems. I find that really hard to, on one hand, be criticising local government funding, and on the other hand, simultaneously sitting around a table that has refused to utilise the mechanisms that we have to maximise the revenue that we could get in the door to spend wisely in a fair way for our ratepayers. All of that said, I have already expressed difficulty and frustration around the additional work that government has given to us. As Craig said, yes, government has been elected. They're putting in place policies that we knew they were going to, that the public has endorsed through election results. However, my frustration really lies with the continual delegation of responsibilities and of requirements of us in local government without corresponding funding sources in order for us to achieve what we need to achieve in that place. And something needs to change. Absolutely, something needs to change there. However, we can't just keep hiking up the rates for our local ratepayers. And none of what I've said before now about local government funding absolves us from our responsibilities as councillors sitting at this table. We started this process with essentially a blank sheet of paper, and we went to our staff with what was essentially a shopping list, plus the things that we were required to do. Now, I could have added more things to that shopping list. There's lots of projects I would love to do, lots of things that I think are worthy projects, and there's worthy projects that have been put up. However, the unfortunate reality of the context we're currently living in, post-COVID, in an environment with rising cost of living, housing costs that are getting, quite frankly, ridiculous, and we just simply can't afford to be undertaking rates rises of this magnitude. There's been some mention of the comments that our city councillor colleagues over the road have made this week, but one I particularly agreed with is that it's irresponsible for us to have rates rises of this magnitude, no matter how difficult we find ourselves as we try to grapple with what we need, because it will end up in a position where we're continually seeing rates rises of this magnitude. Others have referred to that 10-year projection and the compounding reality of it. That means that a house in Harewood that's worth $580,000 in 10 years' time, if we followed that trajectory, we'll be paying $250 more rates. That's only if that 10-year projection is correct. And we know that the first 2 or 3 years probably is, but then there'll be another piece of legislation we have to implement. Then there'll be another piece of infrastructure we need to repair, and that's going to cost us more along the way. We will end up in a position where we have to pay more and more, and unfortunately, we need to work out how we cut our cloth. I also just want to finish with touching on all of that I really reject the notion that anyone who opposes rates rises of this magnitude doesn't care about the environment or doesn't want to see action in that space. Frankly, that is insulting. There are people all over this region, as others have said, working in community groups, working on their farms, and ensuring that they are doing the right things for the environment. It is the issue of our age. It is moving along. We are seeing great progress. My worry, and my worry that I always talk about, is that every dollar we take from a ratepayer is a dollar they can't choose to spend on something that benefits the environment, because we're deciding that we know better how to spend that money. I think about the example on page 13 in the consultation document of a farm in Ashburton who will pay in that first year an extra $700 worth of rates. $700 could buy them 475 wholesale grade plants from the Irari nursery to plant on their farm. What's going to make more of a difference to the environment? Is it going to be us taking that $700 and bringing it into our organisation, or is on the ground action by those people, by those ratepayers, is that dollar better spent there? That's the question that I ask myself, and the question I'd like our ratepayers to give us feedback on. I'd finish with a call for our ratepayers to submit on our plan. Please tell us whether you think it's wise to pass on the cost of planning documents through borrowing to future generations when we know we'll have to rewrite them again in a few years' time. Please tell us whether you do want us to spend all of this additional money, because I think we should have started with what our statutory responsibilities are and gone from there and got the community to tell us what extra they wanted us to spend, rather than saying, here's all the extra we want to spend, tell us what to knock back. We should have started with our core responsibilities and asked for more if the community asked of us. So please, ratepayers, we want to hear your voice. We want to hear you to submit, and I can't in good conscience support going out for consultation with a 24.5% rate rise. I think it's outrageous, and I think it's an insult to the intelligence of our ratepayers that we think we can pull this across them and continue to do so in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. We've got everybody on this side spoken, I think, so now I can start looking around here. Councillor Vicky Southworth.
I'm going to start with the journey for me, which actually started right back when I stood for the position of becoming a councillor. And the things that I stood up and said that I wanted to see were more trees to respond to the problem that we have of a loss of biodiversity, to also help draw down carbon, to help reduce the amount of sediment that was running off our hills. I said that we needed better public transport. Having been a frequent public transport user, and I continue to be, I know how hard it is to actually use public transport to do your best for climate change and for reducing congestion and reducing air pollution in our city. It's not easy, and we need a better public transport system. I said that I would want to see cleaner water in our rivers and cleaner water in our groundwater. Having done a master's in water resource management, I know that these are real serious problems, and there's not a week goes by when this stuff is not in our newspapers. And I believe, as Councillor Pauling said, this is a national issue. The national government is responding to these things and have put freshwater regulations in place that does come at a cost to us in order to try and address these problems. And unfortunately, if as Councillor Hans had said, different landowners did actions with the money in their own pockets, we wouldn't even need to have got to this place. We would have already had planting going in. We would have recognised we needed to pull back 20 years ago, and that didn't happen. Unfortunately, individuals, humans being as they are, act as individuals, but we need collective action, and that's what a regional council does. It puts regulations in place. It recognises when collectively we produce too much of an impact, and there needs to be some sort of regulation to enable us to act actually in the community interest. And that's what I think our long-term plan really does. In our long-term plan, we are looking at what we've called transformational opportunities, but I don't see them as those. I see this as being essentially a step change, recognising just how far we've pushed our environment, just how far our climate and our water and our biodiversity has been pushed, and we are seeing now, we know and we're hearing from constituents just how much of a problem it is for them too. And so I am putting out my support behind this consultation document, and I really hope that we hear from our constituents, of whom I know the vast majority are in properties that are worth less than the $5 million property in Ashburton. The majority of people are living in properties under $500,000, $600,000. And those properties, after our option where we put in the measures that it feels important to take for our climate and our environment, will end up spending $10 total per week on their rates for us to collectively put action towards environmental, water and climate improvement. And so that's really what I want to say. I really hope everyone reads carefully, understands what is it that we're trying to do. Is this something that you can do on your own? And I don't think so. I think this work that we're proposing is something that needs collective action. We need to work together, and we need to see the public good in rates and what rates can do and deliver when we have the desire to make use of this opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I, like many of our fellow councillors, would like to acknowledge, Stephanie, you and your team for the process of delivering this LTP, and thank you for that. And acknowledge that you've had a fraught process to work through, and you've done that with integrity and professionalism. I also like to acknowledge that I understand that this is a consultation document, and that it does reflect the strategic direction that this council has agreed to. I think, but what I'd like to say is that I disagree with our chair and her opening comments when she said we have done our duty. I guess I have not only reservations about the scale of the expenditure, but I have real reservations about the process we've gone through in terms of scrutinising that amount of expenditure. And it seems to me that we've been long on, this process has been long on political jargon and rhetoric and aspirations, but short on responsible governance. And so let me just reflect on the process we've been through to justify my opinion on these. And I think it stems from from the start of the discussion, where we were asked by Stephanie and her team to set some parameters on the size of the rate rise. And effectively the council, in its wisdom, decided there shouldn't be a cap on the size of the rate rise. And because of that, we've concentrated on bringing in things to spend money on without actually reflecting on where we could save money, where we could scrutinise the efficiency of that spend, and whether there are projects that we've already funding which could be funded by other things. And so I look at the process we've been through, and we have got to the position we're in of a nearly 25% rate rise, because we haven't dropped any projects out of the project. We haven't looked for trade-offs in the way we spent money. I think Councillor Hands has reflected on that. And we did have a workshop to help prioritise our projects. But I note from when I look back at that project, although there was a degree of agreement as to what our major priorities were, but some of the projects which didn't feature on the list of priorities are still in our plan and are still being funded. Some of those projects, such as the regional committee, are not large ticket items, but over the life of this plan, the regional committee might cost the council, our ratepayers, about $1 million. And I note from their own report that their function, they see their major function as monitoring targets, which is to me a function that we as councillors should be doing. We do not need to spend $1 million over 10 years paying somebody else to do a job that is actually embedded in our responsibilities. I look at, and several of the councillors have mentioned environmental schools and youth engagement in general, and that's budgeted at $15 million over the life of the plan. And I ask myself, why are we as a council spending our ratepayers' money on environmental school projects, which is the bulk of that expenditure, when it's actually perhaps something that, having initiated this program, and I acknowledge that it is I'm not questioning the value of the project, but what I'm saying is that many of these things where you put in the seeding money and get the project running, but actually the responsible organisation that is in charge of our educating our children should perhaps have taken up that funding. So that should have been put back to the Ministry for Education. And we should have, as a council, gone through some of these lower priority projects and question why we were funding them, and whether in fact there was a better way of continuing these projects rather than putting that burden on our ratepayers. I also note that during the process, and it was right at the 11th hour before we put out a consultation document, that our chair did express some concern about the size of the rate rise, which echoed the concerns of certain my own concerns and several of our councillors, that the rate rise seemed rather large. And whether it was coincidence, whether it was being worked on or not, but that level of scrutiny suddenly just delivered a $3 million saving in expenditure by delaying the implementation of one of the plans by 12 months. Now, I can't help but think at this stage in this process whether in fact we had a cap on our expenditure, whether we'd had put more scrutiny into cost-benefit analysis and a blowtorch to some of our expenditure, how many more millions of dollars we could have saved in developing this long-term plan. So none of this is about the aspirations and goals we want to achieve. It is actually about being responsible governance in terms of how we scrutinise the process. And I think, and I acknowledge that we are mainly an inexperienced council, that we actually haven't gone through process with the due diligence that that our ratepayers deserve. And there's been some comment about the effect of this rate rise on individuals. And people have quoted $300,000 houses or large or rural landowners. We met with the Ashburton District Council, and a councillor, one of the councillors, reflected on the effect that this rate rise could have on her property, and it was in the numbers of around $5,000 increase a year. And she reflected that this was to put in place a government plan that will probably stop her from farming in 20 years' time. She questioned why she would want to do that, why she would want to support that. So, like many of our councillors, I urge our constituents to scrutinise what's proposed, and specifically to not necessarily trust that as a council we have done our job in terms of scrutinising the cost of some of the projects, whether we should be funding those projects in the first place, and to reflect on their priorities and their experience as to whether in fact they think that there's a better way of doing some of these things. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Who have we got next? Councillor Edge, have you spoken yet? Have you spoken? Councillor Tane, do you want to speak? Tane, Upnui? Well, we haven't got much time left, so Councillor Phil Clearwater.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually want to start by agreeing entirely with Councillor Craig Pauling's comments around how hard everybody, including councillors, have worked to produce this consultation document, and including councillors, and people have worked very hard. I guess I've just heard some new things today about the process, but I actually think overall, while everything is always there's a learning curve, of course. In fact, it has been a very transparent and open process, and we will hear more of that, of course, because the whole thing is we are going to be holding hearings so people can tell us their views from the community. That'll be quite totally open. Of course, councillors have individual discussions at times. I just think some of the ideas, for example, that indicate some irresponsibility in terms of the process is entirely wrong. Clearly, what is in front of us too, the whole hearings process is going to give us ample opportunity to scrutinise projects. Of course we'll do that. That's part of what we do. I also wanted to comment about the universal annual general charge, and there's no doubt that in fact, in terms of the fairest way of apportioning rates or taxes is a progressive system. Most countries do that. Okay, here at local government level, we have decided to have some flat rate of the universal annual general charge. But in fact, personally, I'll always think that there is absolutely no reason why poor people should pay the same taxes or rates as rich people. Simple as that. I want to make a brief comment about the borrowing. These are extraordinary times, and as our council don't have a large amount of investment in capital projects, it is timely to consider what the government have called natural capital, and that's what it's about. And I think that gives us opportunity to borrow at the same rate as we would for capital projects. So while the step is unusual, I think it is certainly very worthy of consideration. For me, I guess promoting this consultation document, I came from the stance of what I heard people tell us at about the time of when we had heard back from them on our annual plan. And they were quite clear. They said, look, overall, please clean up our waterways. We get that message all the time since then too. The other thing they said was they wanted us to fix our public transport system, and they wanted us to get on and do that. They wanted us to reduce carbon emissions. And clearly they are very concerned about climate change. And that is amplified by the comments in the auditor's statement today. We are asked to really be onto this by the auditor. So it all makes sense actually, and makes sense in terms of adding up to being a good process. There's no doubt that this work ties very much into the transformational opportunities that we agreed on as a council on our strategic direction. And I actually do not think we are a divided council. There's always going to be different opinions, but overall, we are quite clear on doing this. That's what we agreed on, and that's what we're going to be doing. I just wanted to comment about some things in public transport, if I may, Madam Chair. Just that this document gives us opportunity to make that investment in public transport, because in fact, we are looking at the goals of how our city and Greater Christchurch and region will be by 2030, not tomorrow, but looking right out. And there's no doubt that there's going to be significant population increase. We are charged with actually addressing that and taking care to attend to it. And so around public opportunity and developing that, as is in the document, gives us that opportunity to be proactive right now, and not in fact to not invest, or in fact to make sure we don't have to start retrospectively by 2030 trying to fit in a public transport system there. So we know too about the result of our current transport emissions in Greater Christchurch. 54% of those emissions come from transport, and we've got an opportunity to address those and really deal with climate change. There's information in the document which actually indicates that in 3 or 4 years, we as a council can purchase something like 40 new buses, electric or certainly low emission. If we weren't to do that, by the time the contracts roll over, we'd be, I guess, instead purchasing diesel. And so those are sort of things that I think we as a council will need to continue to think about. And in terms of the electric buses, we've got great opportunities for our whole region. We know that they can be manufactured locally here at Rolleston. We also know, for example, that in about 18 months, I think it is, that the Littleton Ferry is going to be renewed. And so we've got a choice really as to whether we invest in an electric ferry, or if we go back to having an old diesel dunga of a ferry. And I don't think that would stack up either. But I'm going to be very interested to hear what our constituents tell us. I look forward to hearing community views, because that, in fact, is what will give us time to weigh up all the options and to consider the best option for all of our community. And I think I commend Councillor Nicole Marshall's comments about how, in fact, what we're putting out is actually more affordable for people than some of the councils who would have a 5% rate increase in terms of the actual dollars that it will cost people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clearwater. Tumu Taiao, Councillors, would you like to speak?
Kia ora, where do I go to from here? When I started off in this process, I called myself the newbie because I'm so new at the table. And yet, Environment Canterbury, I've worked within Environment Canterbury for 25 years at the Papatipu Runaka level and with my tribe. And as a newbie, I too would like to acknowledge Stephanie for the leadership and the team for their leadership, because as a newbie, I thought I knew what my rates was all about and how my rates were being spent when I came in here. I really did. You know, I came in here and it's only 2 months I've had to come up to speed and start looking at that. And my question was always around, this is not what I'm going to see on my rates bill. you know, and how that money was going to be spent. And that's where I've come from. Papatipu Runaka, my people have been fighting for generations for fresh water for Mahinga Kai. When I went for my job interview for this role, one of the things that I said about why I wanted to be in this seat after 25 years on the outside of this organisation was because I believed that this organisation was on the pivotal edge. And I wanted to be part of that stepping out. I'm a toa, and I am proud to be here as a toa. I am doing what Ngāi Tahu talk about, which is for the next generation, for my mokopuna. And I have a mokopuna in Australia, but my mokopuna will come home. And I want that mokopuna to be proud of every waterway within the mutu. And I stand by that. I am proud of every single one of you sitting at this table. As a toa, I say that. I don't see you as being divided. Heaven forbid if we were all alike. Yeah? No whānau is alike. Whanaungatanga is about being together, about collaborative talking, about being together and sharing. I value every word you have spoken in the 2 months around this. I value every comment that I have heard from the staff to try and get me to understand about these rates. I now put it to my constituents because I do have them. I have them that cover from the top of this motu right down to Arawhenua. Now, I hear at this table you talking about your constituents. I have this larger one with Yayan. I do think about my people that have fought for generations, and do I want them to continue to pay? Or for their whānau to be paying, for those reserves to be paying, for cleaning up, for something that we have been fighting for generations. I am proud of this because it is collaborative. We have put it together, and I really do. I hear about the farming, I hear about the city, I hear all those comments. All I can say is out to all our constituents, not only mine, but out to the wider communities, because only together can we do this. Only together can my mokopuna come home from Australia and put his toes into the moana, into the awa, and know that he can gather with me alongside him. And that is why I sit in the seat. This document is the beginning of starting with that. And I've only had 2 months. And that is the outcome of those 2 months of coming to terms with what my rates are going to do. So thank you for that. Every single person in the motu of Canterbury, of Waitaha, please, even if it is on a piece of paper, please give us your feedback. I know within the regulatory space, I support the regulatory space, and I know that we will, through natural justice, ensure that we have a good outcome through here. And that coming out of my te ao Māori and emotion, I hop into the Western world. And I hope that we as a council, as one sitting here, we will put it together to get an outcome for our community. Kia ora, and I'm sorry if I shouted.
Thank you, Tumu Taiao, councillors. Thank you very much. Councillor Apanui, last chance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was mortified last night to find out on Chris Lynch's page from Joe Citizen that the rest of my fellow councillors are on $600,000 to $800,000 a year, and you all got a car. The sad fact of the matter is, we are a part-time council tasked with saving the planet, and we wonder why things aren't going as smoothly as what we'd like, because we do not spend enough time in this building. We are not full-time professional politicians. Our staff here do a magnificent job of trying to decipher the hieroglyphics that we throw at them on a weekly basis, because we come from such a diverse group. I don't think we're that divided, especially when it comes to the overall outcome of what we're trying to achieve, Councillor Hands. But certainly when it comes to those ends in which we mean to achieve it, yeah, okay, we've got some work to do. So yeah, I support 25%. It will bring us in line with other regional councils. How we divvy that up, I think I'm at odds with everyone in the room with how we actually divvy that up. I came across as the ultimate right winger when I voted to agree with staff at $144 UAGC. But that's right, it's going to roll sometimes. Yeah, look, it's 25% for us is equivalent to something like a 4% increase in city council rates. You know, it sounds really bad, and depending on how we divvy this up, it could be really bad for some people. So, look, when we come back, when we have the deliberations, as multiple people have said, this is a consultation document. When we come back, we can sort out the nuts and bolts then.
Thank you, Councillor Apanui. So that draws us to the end of this. I haven't missed anyone here. Wouldn't that be terrible? I guess they'd be waving out by now. So now what we have to do is move the resolutions separately. First of all, I'll go to number 4, resolution 4, recommendation 4 on page 81. And I'll read it out. Adopts the draft long-term plan 2021-31 supplementary information which is relied on by the content of the consultation document in accordance with section 93G of the Local Government Action Act 2002. That's the big thick document. So I'm going to move that, seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. All those people who agree, please say aye. That's excellent. That's carried. No. Oh, do you want a division? Did some people vote against? Did they? Would you like to vote against? Okay. Would you people like your names recorded? So that is Councillor Ian McKenzie. Did they say division? You just want them recorded in the recorded. No, they said recorded. Record in the agenda. Yeah.
That is good. Just to explain the division, we haven't done one for a while. The 2004 resolution of the previous council was that the names are random. So there's no preferences so I'll call out each councillor's name if you could please say for or against. So starting with Councillor Sunkel. For. Councillor Hands.
Against.
For.
For.
This will be recorded in the minutes, which is why we do this.
Yes, thank you very much, Council Secretary. The next resolution that I'll move is number 5, adopts for public consultation the draft revenue and financing policy and the associated summary of this policy as provided in the consultation document. That is seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. Is there anyone against? Would you just like your name recorded in the minutes, Megan? Yes, that's good. So Megan would, Councillor Hands would like her name recorded in the minutes. Thank you very much. We're moving on now to recommendation 6, adopts the consultation document deciding on what the future of Canterbury looks like. That's this one, the small one, for public consultation in accordance with section 93A of the Local Government Act 2002. That is seconded by Councillor Craig Pauling. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say no. All right. So, would you like it recorded in the minutes? Councillor Claire Mackay, Councillor Megan Hands. Who else said no? Councillor Ian McKenzie. That's great. Yes. Thank you very much. We declare that carried. We're up to now recommendation 7. Delegates to the Council's Chief Executive the authority and responsibility for agreeing minor editorial changes to the consultation document and the supplementary information. That is seconded by Councillor John Sunkel. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Anyone against? Okay, thank you very much. That's carried. Well, that's excellent. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I really enjoyed everybody's speeches. It was really interesting. Thank you very much. Got to exclude the public. I forgot about that. Like, who would like to move? By Councillor John Sunkel, seconded by Councillor Claire Mackay, that the public be excluded. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Service by 6 months. 22nd. Moved by Councillor Peter Scott and seconded by Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie. All those in favour, please say aye. Is there anybody against? No, that being the case, it's carried. So number 10, any other business, not that I've been told about. Notices of motion, none that we know of. Questions, are there any questions? No, there's no questions. You have to give them on notice anyway. Next meeting, Thursday, the 11th of March at the same year. Another year. 10:30 for that one. Closing karakia, I would like to ask Councillor Pauling to close our meeting. Thank you very much.
Kia ora tātou. Tuatai kanui te mihi ki a koutou, mō koutou koiro, mō koutou whakauru pāna tēnei hui, tēnei kaupapa, o tō tātou rautaki, i te tau, te kau, e heke mai nei, ai tēnei te mihi ki a koutou. So just acknowledging everyone again for the work today, for the speeches, for the thoughts, and for all the thoughts that have gone into the work we've done. So just acknowledging everyone again. Ai, he karakia whakamutunga o tātou nei hui, kia tau, nā manaakitanga o nā me karo, ki runga ki tēnā o tātou, ko mahia te hua mā kihiki, kia toi te reo, kia toi te mana, kia toi te aroha, tūturu whakamaa kia tēnā, haumia hui e tātou.
Thank you very much, everybody.